So the first person I'm going to ask to come up here is Christine. Christine actually is a recent graduate of our biomimicry professional program. And Christine's a practicing architect in Victoria on Vancouver Island. And I asked Chris to come because she's like doing it, you know, and I don't think she knew that when she was really doing it, and not many people are doing it, but she just did it anyway. And so I really wanted her to share her experience of, like, she grabbed Kevin's tool and called up Kevin and said, all right, I'm using it, now what? And so we want to hear what her story is about.
I invite you to step back in time with me for a moment. Imagine a young, recently registered architect being invited into the partnership of a well-established, respected architectural practice. Her limited experience in the profession is shadowed by the influence of a book she has recently read, written by Wendell Berry, titled Jaybird Crow. The book is a fictional account of the transformation of our food production systems, and with it, the transformation of our communities. It's also a cautionary tale about the loss of our well-being as we disconnect from the natural world. Berry's narrative is one that this young architect could not unsee, and it marks the beginning of my story. So again, I'm Christine Lintott. I'm an architect and a biomimicry professional. My studio is based on Vancouver Island, off the coast of the west coast of British Columbia. My work is rooted in the temperate rainforest, and it's at the intersection between human activity and the natural world. My work in ecological performance standards is recent, and it began with an invitation. One of those moments when preparation meets opportunity. I was invited to assist a mission-based non-profit organization. This organization, called Power B, was established to enable children and youth, regardless of ability, to get out in nature. Their tagline is "Everyone belongs in nature." A local landowner has leased a large lakeside property to the organization, and this land will support their activities and create a base camp for their operations. Designing a base camp is my work, and the basis for applying ecological performance standards. I'll be brief, so this will be a mere handful in the larger granary. This aerial image of the project site illustrates the relative location of the proposed site for development on the left, the disturbed site as I call it, and the adjacent intact site on the right. Ecological performance for each area was measured using Kevin's Ecometrics Easy tool. Thank you, Kevin and Catherine, for all your work. And the relative performance of various ecological functions and services was established. The difference between the levels of performance, the delta, is the basis of design. How is the disturbed site designed to perform equal to or better than the intact site? The ambient conditions of place combine with the landscape attributes which operate in relationship to deliver the ecosystem services. And this is a really important thing to understand. Our solution space will define built attributes, not landscape attributes, but built attributes, combining with those ambient conditions of place to deliver ecological performance. The ecological functions we're designing for include air filtration and temperature regulation, carbon uptake, water filtration and management, and noise attenuation. If you want an interesting conversation, ask me about that later. Our design for ecosystem services includes carbon sequestration, nutrient recycling, soil formation, provision of water and energy. Cultural services, aligned with the organization's mission, will include therapeutic, recreational, and educational services. The work of the design team is to take the site's ecological performance standards, metrics, and to apply developed tools to establish fit with building performance metrics. So this is a Marion. How do we measure ecological performance in a built infrastructure? What are the ambient characteristics and building attributes that contribute in relationship to ecological function or service performance? How can the tools we use in the building industry be adapted or reimagined to integrate ecological metrics? How do we benchmark, thank you for that C, design, implement, and measure ecological performance? To date, my applying ecological performance standards to a built infrastructure has yielded highs and lows. Since we're making it up as we go, thank you, Janine, the analogy of a roller coaster is somehow appropriate. The most evident high, and you're going to see patterns here of what we've already heard, the most evident high is one of timing. There's an appetite in our industry for doing things differently, no question. And there's an urgent need for this industry to step up and take accountability for its role in ecological degradation. There continues to be rapid urban growth and the need to replace or reimagine aging infrastructure, and that's important. There's a reorganization of the system, there's a recognition that leverage point here is systemic. Architecture can't simply give visual nod to nature's beauty. It's more than shaping a building as a flower. The conversations with clients, engineers, funders, regulators, stakeholders centers around interconnection and relationship. And it is in these conversations that the case is being made for building solutions that correlate ecological health and human well-being. Ecosystems tell us how to thrive in relationship. Despite the acknowledgement of this interconnectedness, there is still a challenge to demonstrate the value proposition of first cost. This is still a market go, no-go point on most projects and is a driver of the solution space for building systems. Being first. This is purposefully a modest high and low, a little blip there. There's a tension between being first, something that we're socialized to aspire to, yet an underlying reluctance to be first in the innovation of building better infrastructure, long-term product performance, lack of valuation models, and so on. I'm recognizing the limited number of professionals that are bought into thinking differently, particularly reframing the design challenge that we are ultimately solving for. What is the gap? Likely, these are perceptions of liability, avoidance of being first, and a lack of tools to model, test, and validate. This one is both a high and a low, hence the loop. I do find myself alone, even amongst colleagues, and recognize the limited scale at which I can implement ecological performance standards on my projects. Despite this limitation, I acknowledge that the critical role of telling the stories of this work as a means of broader impact. I believe that built infrastructure will emerge from applying ecological performance standards. I really believe in this. And nature will be our model, mentor, and measure. And we're here for this. Here's a few conditions or tools that I dream of as a practitioner to accelerate this emergence. Building capacity. Ecologists in regulatory roles. Whoa, imagine that. Translators to bridge ecological intelligence that informs decision-making, design, and evaluation. And please, if you'd like to talk more about this, I've got some crazy ideas. Tools that optimize the relationship between ecological performance data sets and building performance metrics. Tools that are visually accessible and operate algorithms that allow for the playing out of scenarios in real time. And there's some really good examples of this. These tools are being developed independently. How will they communicate? Can we tune the languages to facilitate translation and evaluation? This DREAM tool is a central repository of ecological data sets. They're smart, accessible information that informs baseline metrics. This would be a comprehensive resource, publicly accessible, constellated information that is readily available, local, regional, and relevant. And I dream of case studies, my own FOBF, which is fear of being first, and my analyzer style, dreams of stacks of case studies, which are the foundation for my efforts. Successes, failures, works in progress, it all matters. My promise to you today is to author a number of these in the time I have left to practice, and they will be readily available, they will be open source, and they're going to be inspiring. Processes and products. I dream of an industry that's evolved in considering the flow of all the services and materials in the industry. Inspired by the net zero waste guidelines. Check out the work of Clara in New York City. Communities that can support the families of makers. Cultural service courtesy of the work of Richard Fisher in California. And yes, I do dream of biomimetic building system components that are inspired by nature's genius. Broadly available and procurable. I only have 30 seconds.
Woohoo! I like the world you're painting now. I want to live there.
Okay, I'm going to invite you to step forward in time with me. So imagine a 65-year-old architect and pre-professional in 2035. It's the eve of an event that will see the transfer of ownership of the leased lands to the power of the organization. Almost 2 decades in operation, Basecamp continues its successional maturation, and this is important. The demonstration of ecological performance standard remains a benchmark and has seeded dozens of base camps in communities around the world. The impact on children and youth is profound. Human well-being synchronized with ecosystem well-being. The celebratory event will include regional authorities from an amalgamated South Island, regulators who have stewarded the transformation of the conversation around conservation of intact systems and their relationship to generous built environments. These regulators boast unique accounting ledgers and continue to color outside the lines. Land use planning is void of jurisdictional fragmentation. The stewardship model of planning contextualizes built projects within a cohesive ecological framework. This architect is my natural in built worlds, realize.
I'm just going to keep that back. That is great. If you haven't had a chance to sit at a table yet with Chris, you're definitely going to want to. As you can imagine, you just got a little surface skim of all that incredible thinking and actual doing that she's been really cooking up. And I have no doubt that you've got a whole slew of case studies that we're all going to be reading about for sure. We'll all come to the ribbon cutting for the